Great.
Okay, but tell us about your trip to Robben Island, your expectations, and what you experienced when you actually got there.
Yeah, one of the funny things which I still remember is the up and down feelings of positive and then depression again. When we left, everybody was talking about, no, the revolution will come and things will change very quickly. We're not going to. And then alternatively, they said that, remember, the courts gave you these sentences, but we're going to keep you there, like they did with Suleiman. So you're going to stay there indefinitely. I remember there's a Latin term called Sinner's Day, and it was one of the notices that we read, and we asked him, what does Sinner's Day mean? And then they said, that means until you die. Sinner's Day means something about day, every day or something like that. And we didn't know what that means. And they said, well, you'll stay there until you die. And then we were threatened by the warders and said, there you will cry bitter tears and you will have nothing to eat but just dry bread and water.
This is on Robben Island?
Yeah, on the way to Robben Island. And when we arrived on the island, remember we had a reputation of attempting to escape. So to counteract that, they put double leg irons on and double handcuffs on, and then they handcuff us into pairs, so it was difficult to move from place to place. And when we arrived on the island, handcuffed like that with extra irons and so on, they got us onto this lorry, and we struggled and helped one another onto this lorry because we were also now handcuffed and together and leg ironed together. And then they drove the lorry up at huge speed. Funny thing is, they always in a hurry. They always used to say, not tomorrow, now. You don't speak Afrikaans.
No, I follow it though.
And then we bundled on this lorry and drove up at great speed. When we are there, also the route up there. And when we arrived in front of the prison gate, it was a tip truck, they just dumped us off on the ground and we bundled together. And the handcuffs injured some of us, and well, all of us. And then they hurried us into the prison, our first day there. And then we had our civilian clothes. Now we were going to change into prison clothes, and they stood there with threats and say, we must get undressed now. They're going to send the clothes home or burn it. So I said, no, you're going to send my clothes home, you're not going to burn it. But the humor of the Boer was also there. You know, there's three wise monkeys. There are three wise monkeys there, and a little note onto each monkey. One was in Afrikaans, wil regeer, wil studeer, wil marseer. When you say wil marseer, wil studeer, wil regeer, means wants to march. That means we want to form an army. And then we want to study, wil studeer, and wil regeer, we want to govern. So that was then, it was struck me as very interesting. And then we stood there naked without clothes on, and they threw us these prison clothes, which consisted of a khaki shirt and khaki shorts, no shoes, and a white canvas jacket, no underclothes, and we were then bundled down into the single cells, where we stayed for a while. And after that we were taken out to the main sections to join all the other political prisoners. And but the first thing, we arrived there in the morning from the one section to the general section, it's called, and we were not going to be issued with clothing. And they just threw shoes at you, and they gave me a size 6 and a size 9, but it was very dispattered. And I was having an argument with the warders, you can't do that. And I said, I want to go to the store and go look, and I went to the store, and I had a huge argument with them there about clothing and what does the prison regulation says, and because Dalla Uma, who was our lawyer, gave us a summary of the prison regulations, to read. And they said, what prison regulations? Leave that here. And they tore it up and threw it in the bin. The whole prison regulations. And then I had a huge argument with them. And then when I got finally out of the store, the quarry span was already gone. So I didn't go to work in the quarry. And then they said, okay, you're going to work in the yard now. And I said, well, what? Then the warder took me to a passageway, concrete passageway, and there was a criminal there. We call them common law prisoners, not criminals. And he was there, and they said I must work with him. And he didn't talk much, and he said we must polish this passageway. So he had some polish there, and he dabbed the polish on the floor. And it looked like a very patterned type of a leopard skin floor with dabs of polish on. And then he had the broom, which he then spread the polish around, and I helped him. And when it was finished, he gave me 2 rags. And he took 2 rags. And I said, well, what do you do with that? He said, we polish it now. You stand on the rag like that. And you slide the rag like that. And back again like that. Up and down. So here we were now moving up and down, up and down. And then he started to chant in Afrikaans. The chant was, die plek se naam is tronk, die plek se naam is tronk, die plek se naam is tronk. Up and down, that means the name of this place is jail, the name of the place is jail.
It was a chant.
Yeah. And we were now moving up and down, the whole blessed morning. And so later I asked him about the criminal. I asked him now, he said, you are lucky you're working here, tomorrow you're going to the quarry. And then there were some other criminals also there clearing the passageway, and there was one criminal who couldn't walk properly. And he said, you see that guy there? He was in the quarry. And in order to escape the quarry, he got hold of a blade and he cut this tendon off. So the foot just flapped. And they took him to the hospital and they put a stitch on between the 2 tendons and bandaged it up. And now he's working as a light labor. There are different grades of labor. There's light labor, suitable labor, and hard labor. Now political prisoners are all classified as hard labor, unless you are sick. And you've got a doctor's certificate which say that you are indeed sick. And then you're given a light labor written on your card. So now my card said hard labor. So I asked him now, he said, well, that guy cut that off. Then I asked him now, how does this prison work? He said, here we've got gangs here amongst, and the sooner I join a gang, the better. I said, well, what's the choice? And he says, there's the 26th, there's the 28th, and there's the Desperados, and then there is the Air Force. And he said, each one of those gangs I have to join. And he said, oh yes, and the other gangs, also the ANC. So to his mind, the ANC was a gang. Now gangs, if they meet one another, they also greet one another with a salute. So those who are members of the 26 lift up the little finger and say, Sickies. Now this is a 6th finger, you count around. And then the 8th finger, the 28th. There. And then there was the Desperados. And the Desperados at the first. So I asked him, well, what is gang is he? And he says, he's a member of the Desperados. And he says, we greet one another, just like the ANC. And I said, well, the Desperados also had an emblem. And the emblem consists of a hammer and a sickle. Now, totally amazing is the communist symbolism there. And I said to him, well, why the sickle? And I said, that's a type of a knife. And the hammer is om te done.
To eat.
Yeah, to hit people with. And then he said, oh yes, you remember the ANC. So I said, if I join, can I join your gang? He said, well, if you join the gang, I must pass the test first. And the gang boss, who is has got a special name, he will give me a task to do. I later met the gang boss, the Desperados, whilst I was in solitary confinement, much, well, a year later really. And that's how I spent my first day in prison with this. Then another guy came along also, a member of the Desperados, and I asked him, "Oh, what's your name?" He says, "My name is in Afrikaans for uil." And then he said, "But you remember my name?" And then he smiled, he said, "You had a girl with a U in and an L on." I don't know where he got it from. He said, he had it made so when he smiled, you know with who you are smiling. So that, and the following day was the Quarry day. So this guy was also telling me about how bad it is in the Quarry. It's best if I try and become a light labor, cook up something and try and bamboozle the doctor and let him give you the certificate. But there was an atmosphere of antagonism to me as a particular person in that resort. Because I was one of 3 colored. Now, the warders then classified us. There is the warder, which is the boss, and the colored is the almost boss, amper boss, and then of course there were the servants, which were the black people. So that classification was from the warders. Oh yes, there was another gang also, and it was the Big Five. And the warders was also given a name, a gang name, and the warders were called the Big Six. So the Big Five corporates were the Big Six, he explained to me. So the Big Five job is to be in the eyes of the warder, to find out what everybody is doing, and to go and report to the warders, the bosses, the Big Six. And one of the most despicable human, I should not say that, human degenerates came from that Big Five. They were so malicious and made things so difficult for us that, and then they went to inform the warders. I remember when I was working in the Quarry and I stopped and I had to arrest, the Big Five came along and says, "Boss, everybody werk nie, boss, he doesn't want to work." So it was that type of gang arrangement there. I remember when I got into, now there was a guy there, a member of the PAC, his name was Sam Botler. I wrote a little essay about him particularly because when I met him, he came along to me and said he will help me settle down and he'll be my guide and he'll make me a wooden spoon, because they don't issue spoons. You get a piece of wood and then you carve the wood into a type of a spoon, and he said he will do that for me. So he made me a type of a wooden spoon like that, and it was for eating purposes. And then but before we got that, then he took me to the Quarry, and Quarry line, there were huge numbers of people standing in force in the Quarry line, waiting to go out. And all the spans goes out separately. There's one span called the seaweed span, the bamboo span. Their job was to pull seaweeds out of the sea. And then there was the bow group, the building group, and they built structures there on the island. They were skilled in that. And of course, then there were carpenters, there were shoemakers, there were people who did the washing, and of course there was the Quarry. And I, of course, to go to the Quarry, and he took me to the Quarry. But that first day, when I stood in the Quarry, there was a commotion somewhere in front. And when I looked around there was a warder having an argument with a prisoner. And this prisoner was saying, it sounds much nicer in Afrikaans, he doesn't want to work, I'm not going to work, and I shall not work. Ek wil nie werk nie, ek gaan nie werk nie, ek sal nie werk nie. And then they assaulted him and took him down to the punishment cells. I don't know what happened to them there. Well, of course, I went to visit the punishment cells myself later on. And then we walked out into the Quarry. Then the warders came. There was the head of the prison was a lieutenant, and the warder came and they saluted the lieutenant, and the whole span walked out of the Quarry, out of the prison yard. And then we walked, and then the warders walked on the sides, and they had these automatic rifles with them. And the head of the prison, of the Quarry, was sitting on a huge horse, and he was riding there. His name was Delport, and his nickname was Libomvu. Libomvu is a Xhosa word, means the red one. He was one of the most malicious people I actually met also there from the warders. And very soon we came to a channel, and we walked down into the channel. Prisoners at the lower level, and the warders on the side at the higher level with their guns and their patterns and so on. And we walked towards the Quarry. And I walked with some bottler. And when we arrived at the Quarry, he said to me, there are lots of jobs in the Quarry, but we are about 800 in the Quarry. They cannot say who goes who. So everyone more or less goes and chooses what work he wants to do. So some bottler says to me, the easiest one would be the spades. So I went to stand in the spades queue with those others. And this Delport came along and looked at me and said, what the bloody fuck? I must go and take a pickaxe. I can't stand here in the spades pen. What do I think I am? And so I went to the pickaxe pen now. So I got hold of a pickaxe, and we all walked to the work area for the pickaxe. It was a type of, production. The pickaxes were in front, and they loosened the soil. And then behind them came the spades, and they up the soil a little bit. And then behind them comes the stone carriers, and they take the stones out of the ground and they carry it to the side there. So I was on the pickaxe man. Now, all work with music. In fact, music and singing makes the monotony of work much more easier. So I got the pickaxe pen, and they started singing. Remember, I can't sing, but the songs are in Xhosa, one of the African Cape language. And I remember the song. It says "Kulu malingauza koseli madota, houses sabula besayo." And when it comes high, then you eat it down. And then you lift it up again, and the song goes on. And when it comes to houses sabula, then you drop the pickaxes. So that wasn't so bad. And then the head of prison, the same Delport came along, and he looked at this and he said, "This bloody nonsense. Die amperbaas moet reg werk." So he said, "No, you must change the song to the zip song." Now the zip song goes like that. Chonapik, chona is a Xhosa word which means down. So it's chonapik, zip, chonapik, zip.
Much faster.
So that's chonapik, zip. Very soon tired, I said, "Oh, bloody nonsense," and I missed the rhythm. And Delport called the warders and charged him for being lazy. So they took my identification card, and I was not. They use an Afrikaans word lay. I went to look at my prison record, which is in the archives there in Pretoria. A whole pile of it there. And then I was amazed at what they wrote there. They wrote there, lay and tra, lazy, good for nothing, cannot be entrusted with anything, resist all form of discipline, must be kicked out of the workspace. That's all there in the archives. So I got my first then charge of being lazy, lay and traag they call it. And then when lunchtime came, I was so exhausted, and I'd already had blisters on my hands. So we they stopped working, and we walked to a type of enclave, like a paddock even. And there was a trough of water in the center, made of cement, broken pieces off the edge. And that is where you can go and drink some water. And then each one of us were given food according to the color of your skin and what race you belong to. I just dropped from sheer exhaustion, and some bottler came to me, and the black are given a bit of a cool drink called Puzamantla. Puzamantla means a sip of strength. but it's made of maize there. And he fed me with this posamantla. And I couldn't even eat because I was so fatigued and zonked out. Then very soon the lunch hour was finished and Delport came and says, yep. And then we went back to work. And Delport says, take him away from me. I must not take him away and give him a wheelbarrow. And see that he gets an iron wheelbarrow. Now there are two types of wheelbarrows. There's a wheelbarrow made of a rubber wheelbarrow, which is inflated and well oiled. But the iron wheelbarrow is the iron wheel. And it's rusted, and even when the wheel turns on the fulcrum, was rusted and it squeaked. And he says, Delbert says, see that I get the iron wheelbarrow. So now I had to push this iron wheelbarrow up and down, but I just sat and rested. And I got another charge for being lazy. And that is how the first day in the quarry ended. When I got back, some butler came and helped me wash my hands and bathe my forehead. And then I asked some butler, what is your sentence? And some butler said, no, don't worry, let's get settled you so that we've got a long way to go. I've got the initial sentence of 12 years, and he settled me down, and I slept almost with a dreamless sleep, and the morning came so quickly. But the main thing is, later on I discovered what some butler's sentence was. His sentence was death, and he was going to be hanged. And here was this guy so concerned with me and trying to settle me down. A few days later on, they came to call him, and they took him to Pretoria, and they hanged him. We never heard about him. 3 years ago, we went up there to exhume his body and give him a proper burial somewhere else.
Tell us about your solitary confinement.
Yeah, well, the events that led up to the solitary confinement, when by that time we had a general sense of dissatisfaction. The food, we were given porridge in the morning, but often if you look carefully in the porridge, you'll find pink streaks here and there. Those were the worms that once lived in the porridge. And it gives you diarrhea. You can either try and move it out very carefully, or later on we just ate it because there was so little food. And we were given, if you are colored, you're given maize grit, white maize grit. If you are black, you're given whole maize kernels, just from without the cob. And the regulation says we must be given so many grams of vegetables, but it was just a boiled onion. So, and there was nothing else in it, very little salt in it, so the food that reminded you of cotton wool. But in the afternoon, if you are colored, you're given a quarter piece of bread with a layer of fat on it. But since we were living in a community, we shared as much as we possibly can, toothpaste and whatever soaps we can have. And I cut bread into as many pieces as I can, and I gave it, and they gave me porridge. If you are black, you have porridge in the morning, maize kernels for lunch, and porridge again in the evening. Try porridge in the evening again, so that. And then the health situation was also very bad, because if you get sick, you must diagnose yourself, and you must go and stand in the queue according to what sickness you think. Yeah. If you got stomach, you send the stomach queue, the throat queue, the coughing queue, the various queues. And if you can't diagnose yourself, and only on Thursdays you're going to stand in the doctor's queue. Now, but to stand in the doctor's queue is a special privilege, because to stand in the doctor's queue, you must first prove that you are indeed sick. And only 2 proofs were allowed. when you stand in a doctor's queue, then they bring in a medication and give it to drink. And often it was castor oil. If you refuse to drink, that is proof that you're not sick. Then you better go to the quarry. Or they've got a huge pickaxe handle and they swing it at your head. If you duck, then you're not sick, because sick people cannot duck. And if you pass those tests, then you can stand now into this doctor's queue. Now, when I think back, it sounded rather funny, but it also had a very acute tragedy for me, because, you know, in the cell we lived, there were about 16 in the cell, but for sharing, we had sub-units within the cell. And it was not decreed or agreed on, it just seems to happen naturally. People next to you and people next to you joined a group, and we became a subgroup, almost like a family. And we shared our things in that particular family, because we can't share everything in the whole cell, because it was not very easy. And we shared tasks and jobs and those types of things in the cell itself, because we had to polish the cell and keep it clean. And on weekend they have got this inspection in the morning, when you have to stand at attention, and then they come along and check whether you're properly shaved, whether your haircut is all right, and your clothes is clean. If not, you are charged for not being neat and tidy on Sunday mornings. But there was one extremely nasty chief warden. He comes along there and he goes into the bathroom and he puts his hand into the toilet around the bin and he scratches some of this out, and he comes up and says, "Look, I found it in the toilet." Charges the whole cell for failing to keep the toilet clear. I didn't put that in my book. It was so. There are certain things which I couldn't put in the book because it is so crass and so. But in the case now, the ELF, and we were allowed to study, but they didn't want to give us writing material, so we made our own books out of cement paper, which we stick together. And those who had pencils broke it into quarters, and each one was now given as pencils. And we thought, no, this cannot go on like that. The only thing a prison can do is to go on to Hungersstrike. So we organized this Hungersstrike. And I had this bright idea that Hungersstrike must be published outside. So I wrote an article about prison conditions there. And we subverted one order. We promised that we take it out to some of our friends on the other side, who will then publish it in the papers, which was against South African government regulations in any case. So I wrote this article, but I was also much more ambitious. I drew a map of the island and I pointed out where the weak points are, where the water supply is, and if you disable the water supply, you can put some mild poison in there, where is electricity generators and so on. And this warder looked at it and got such a fright. So he took it to the security head, and then I was arrested then for the first time. And they called in the security police, and the security police said, "This is a conspiracy for sabotage. They're going to drop another count against me." But just at that time, Chairman Straffen was arrested for writing, a white guy, writing on prison conditions. Now, if they charged me, I arrived there, and then I would corroborate him. So they decided not to charge me, but instead they gave me 9 months of solitary confinement. But solitary confinement, you must understand, the maximum according to the law, to the prison rules, is 21 days. And solitary confinement starts with no food for 3 days. Actually, then they bring you water only, and then they take maize, they boil it, and they skim off the top of the maize and give you the water only. But very soon you know that you must, if you are on that solitary confinement without food, don't eat, only drink water. Don't eat anything they give you. because that will aggravate your hunger, and it will stop your body from making the changes, the ketone balance in your bloodstream, and you will. My advice to you, if you're ever in solid confinement without food, don't take that food. So it went on like that for about a month, and then after that they bring you the ordinary food. So that was then this solid confinement. And then they wanted, then I said I wanted the Quran, I'm Muslim after all. Then I said, no, there are things in that Quran which they can't, with the sense of can't read, it's for Arabic, you see. Because my family sent Qurans, the Yusuf Ali version of it. So they said, unfortunately, they can't give me the Quran. And I said, what about the Bible? You know, the different officers which comes along on weekends, and I asked one, what about the Bible? And he said, what does communists like you want with the Bible? You don't even believe in the Bible. The criminals take Bibles and then they make cigarettes from the leaves, because it's a very thin piece of pages, and they put tobacco in and fold it up, and it becomes, they call it a zol, and they smoke the Bible pages. Well, they ultimately gave me a Bible, and I read that Bible from cover to cover. There was nothing else to do. And I became a bit of an expert in this Bible business. And then ultimately I insisted that I said I'm going to inform my family, and they're going to take it up with the lawyers, and then because it says a type of religion persecution, and they eventually gave me the Quran too. So I read this Quran also from cover to cover, and when I finished it, nothing else to do, so I started memorizing the English. And I memorized that English to such an extent that I can close my eyes and quote you segments of it, like it starts with, this is the book, in it is guidance, so without doubt to those of you who believe in the unseen, our stead was in prayer, and spent out of what has been provided for them, for they are true guidance from the Lord, and it's those who will prosper. You know, I can rattle it off like that. And when I finished that, I thought, now what do I do next? Now the Quran, I had a commentary by Yusuf Ali. It is the text and the commentary. So I also started memorizing that also. The last part of the commentary is particularly relevant, I think. It says, and is still with us, and thus spoke Muhammad. But there is still with us much sorrow and sin, injustice, oppression, wrong and hate. Still do men love slaves, protesting smoothly the end of slavery. And even the fine individual voice is drowned in the raucous din of slogans new, but all falsehood long forgotten. The commentary of the end. And then I came also on another segment, sayings of the Prophet. I don't know whether it's authenticated or not, but one part which I like particularly well was say about knowledge. And he says, knowledge is a flower amongst friends, an ornament amongst friends, an armor against enemies, and it is your society in solitude. So I thought, well, that is a very encouraging thing. And then when I came to the last part of Baqarah, which says, Rabbana wa la tu'akhidna, when Allah does not put a burden on anyone unless he has a strength to bear it, and I thought, well, if that is true, no, then I will not worry about whatever happens to me. And I went through this solitary confinement fairly well, I think. And then one day, the head of the desperados arrived in the solitary confinement. Solitary confinement also has another element. They put you into one cell, and then they move you around after a couple of days. So you'll never have stability. So they move you all over from one place to the other place. And in a day, you've got a blanket, you've got 3 blankets and a mat to sleep on. But in a day, the mat goes outside the door, so you can't sit, you sit on the concrete, and you can't sleep. There was one warder who came to wake me up, sleeping there on the concrete, and he said to me, what, are you a coward? You want to sleep and dodge the solitary confinement? Wake up, man, you must feel it. So, And then this guy, Rona, Edward Gully, arrived there, just opposite me. Now, if you talk in solid confinement, they stop your food immediately. So it has to be absolutely quiet. But on Sundays when they are away, or sometime during the, we did talk to one another. In fact, one of the tricks about solid confinement, you must have a little piece of mirror, and you stick it out and you can see down the passageway. If they, but this guy, Rona, had a little piece of mirror. And when we talk, and he looked at this, if a warder comes and he signals to me, a warder is coming. Now the warder had the cap on with a badge in front, so when he does that to me, I know there's a warder coming, and we just keep quiet a bit. And then we became very good friends. This head of the Desperado. Then on these talks, I asked him, now what if I want to join your gang? And he said, well, there's some jobs I have to do to prove that I'm worthy of it. And I said to him, like what? He says, their enemy is the Big Fives. And now he will then point at the Big Five guy to me, and when we are in a quarry, I must take a spade, go to this big guy and smash his head. And if there's enough blood coming out, then I qualify to become a member of the Desperado. And he says to me, but for you, I'll give you a special entrance requirement. So I said, well, what is that? And he said, no, when the commanding officer comes along next time, when he comes along, I must grab his cap, drop it on the floor and stamp my foot on it. And if I do that, I'm welcome to join them. Then he said, oh yes, but you're a member of the ANC, so you've got your own gang. But there was a period when we had no food. But this war, then I asked Rona, why are you here? And he said, you know, I'm the boss of the Desperado, and sometimes I make decrees. And when I make a decree, everybody must follow that decree. So a couple of days before we made a decree, you see, just in front of the kitchen there's a little stoop with a veranda on, and he made the decree, nobody's allowed on the stoop today. And he made the announcement quite clear. And very soon the warder got onto the stoop. And he said, now because of that, he had to exert his authority. So he went up to the warder and he punched the warder. And the other warders came and grabbed him and dragged him down to solid confinement. And he was given 21 days of solid confinement. They just opposite me for the particular period. So one day I remember quite clearly, the two of us were now without food because of, I don't know what we did, so they stopped our food for them. But he intimidated warders. So he used to go, you know, in solitary confinement, you go out one person at a time. Because you're allowed 15 minutes outside. In that 15 minutes, you must take your toilet bucket, which is a type of a drum, and go dump it into the toilet, clean it, and put some carbolic acid, actually sheep dip in it. And all within 15 minutes, you must now bring it back. And then back to the solid confinement cells. Now, if there's enough time, then you can have a walk around the yard behind the solid confinement. If it's not, if you run out of time, then you go back. But we were then without food. But this Rona guy was so sharp, he goes and steals food. Now, when you go out, you've got a towel to dry yourself with. It's a piece of cloth about that size. It looks like a kitchen cloth. So I used to steal maize, mealies, or rice, wrap it in a towel. One towel for me and one towel for him. So we had food, which he stole. But one day he couldn't steal food. But he stole half a drum of coffee. Black coffee. For each of us. And he intimidated the warders, brought it in, put it around behind my door, and he had a drum of coffee for the morning. And now we were drinking coffee instead of food for the whole time. It was a holiday.
What was that, Robben?